So last week, and Jari talked about just now, and it was about, we're talking, of course, about face-to-face facilitation. How do you listen to another person? How are you present? What's your role as a facilitator and all of that? And as you have noticed, we have also many tools on the champagne. That's a tool as well. So what kind of tools should you have in your toolbox? If you are a facilitator or a transformation leader or a change agent. And here the point is something we talked earlier. Remember, the focus is as a facilitator. Remember, it makes sense to have this division. Sometimes you are like a participant in a team and you need to get work done, or you are the decision maker. You need to make the decision. But sometimes you are the facilitator. Just like Jari was saying that, you know, the client, the person you're facilitating, is responsible for their actions and everything. So as a facilitator, you are more neutral. And that takes you a whole different perspective into tools, for example. Because if you're not the one making the decisions, so how should you think about tools? And remember from the very first lecture, or maybe it was the second one, we kind of introduced that in the last decade or something, organizations have started using a lot of different tools, frameworks, you know, kind of guiding principles such as business model canvas or lean canvas or value props or, you know, customer journey canvases. And that's why the tool, and these are very popular and very good and very efficient. So, of course, the thing is that you have a tool, it doesn't necessarily help you to get those answers. So what do? Yeah, you call the midwife. Midwife being the person who helps other people to give birth to new ideas or babies. And I like the metaphor of a midwife, the facilitator as a midwife, because you could say that as like a real midwife, like in this picture, your point is, of course, helping others to succeed. That gives you a different stance. You are in a way neutral. You're not totally neutral. But the whole point is that this is not your baby. You're not necessarily the decision maker. This is not necessarily your business. But you are there to make things less painful. And you're there to, you know, produce healthy results, if you will. So I think that's kind of a mindset that as a facilitator, you are a midwife. However, some of you might be thinking that, but this only applies if I'm an external facilitator, if I'm a consultant, or, you know, I'm an outsider who has come to help. What if I'm the boss? What if I am the, you know, decision maker? Or what if I'm a team member? What if we together need to be accountable for what we do? Or you are the product owner. So is this very different? Yes and no. Like I said, it is different if you are the decision maker. But however, you can totally look at things as the midwife. So what if, as the boss, your job is to make the rest of the team succeed? In a way, it's not about you as the boss succeeding. It's about you helping others to succeed. Now, that's a very facilitative role. That's more role of a midwife than yourself being the superstar who is, you know, it's all about you. So it's, again, you can apply this same perspective even if you are the product owner. You know, again, this is a very human thing. If you're the product owner, yes, you are probably responsible for the decisions. But you can take this perspective that, hey, if I want to be successful as a product owner, then I need to make these others successful. Clients, customers, end users, stakeholders. If they succeed using my product, then I am successful as well. So I'm sure you kind of get this, that this is a totally different perspective from a very traditional, and I would say a conservative thing, that where we are more individualistic and think that, you know, as a boss, it's all about me and I am the kind of the, how should I say, the point where every decision is made. So the whole point of facilitation, whether you are an external facilitator or a person in a decision-making position, is that you could look at things by helping others to succeed. Good. Having said that, the point of this afternoon is knowing the tools and methods in your toolbox. So what do you have when you open your toolbox to help others to succeed? And Of course, we could list you a bunch of tools, and some of the links we're going to give you today are a lot of good tools, and I've mentioned a couple of them. But if you really want to be a good tool user, you probably need to understand a little bit deeper. You need to, it's not just that you know that this is a tool and this is how I use it. You probably need to understand why and where and how this tool is applicable. And that's what I call the difference between it being a professional with a tool or just being a zombie with a tool. Like a hammer, are you just hitting with the hammer without understanding why you're using the hammer to get what you want? Great. And the first thing about tools, such as these that are in the picture, the canvases and frameworks and all of that, that tools are not just for doing. We typically kind of think this is kind of a nice place because it's actually full of tools. I have a whole wall full of tools. I'll try to grab a tool here. Now, this looks very cool, right? So the whole point of a tool, of course, it's not just for doing. We might think that this, monkey wrench is actually about turning wrenches and about doing. This is a very simple tool. The ones in the picture are a little bit more complicated intellectually. But that means that these tools have also functioned as tools for communication, tools for what I call research, tools for engaging others. And yes, tools are also for getting things done, so actually doing. So I'll go now one by one of these just to, hammer in these points and hopefully kind of get you thinking about whatever tools you are using, that do they have these attributes or dimensions as well. So tools for communication, and like the megaphone in the picture, that is a tool for emphasizing a person's voice. And tools for communication, you can think about, if you're grabbing a tool, a business model canvas, or maybe a wrench, tools are also to sell ideas. This is a tool that I can convince other people that this is a good idea. Tools that we can argue and have a good discussion about, decision making, maybe the context onions, and those are good at that. Tools for clarifying complex things. So remember last time I talked about, or two weeks ago, I talked about the DUM goal criteria. So you can use them as a communication tool, or you can actually use them as a tool to get things done. And there was actually a big difference between them. And then, of course, communication tools are really good at bringing order into chaos, which has popped up in your answers as well. Things are complex, things are chaotic. If you're doing something new, it's very confusing. And I listed a couple of the tools over there, and I hope some of them you're familiar with. And I think these have very strong communication function in addition to getting things done. And maybe the sparring question, if you're looking at a tool and thinking, so does this have a communication perspective? Then the question you might ask that, if I was alone, would I use this tool? Wrench, yeah, I would use it even if I'm alone. So maybe this is not actually a communication tool. Second point was what I called researching, but I added here the learning as well, that the tool might have a strong researching and learning function. And I mean by this is gathering knowledge and learning from it. So like the first bullet says, maybe the tool is actually really good at gathering and analyzing data. Or maybe the tool's main point is that we actually, as a group, we learn new ways of working, new ways of thinking. One of the things about business model canvas, I think, is super good at helping people to think about and learn about what business model is all about, and so forth. So like interviewing techniques are a tool, checklist. Shadowing as a method, I think that's all about gathering knowledge and understanding. Literature studies, of course, are a very good one. And maybe the simple sparring question, if you're looking at a tool, is that, is this tool for research and learning? If I know enough, would I use this tool? Nah, I wouldn't use a wrench to learn or research things, so maybe this is not actually that. Third, and this should be probably familiar at this stage, of course, we have a lot of tools that have a strong function about engaging other people. So what kind of tools help other people to contribute? get them inspired, excited. What tools can we use so that we actually give other people a voice, encourage them to say their opinions and, you know, bring their creativity and all that. Tools which also kind of ensure the diversity of opinions, that how we look at it from all different angles, and commitment and ownership as well. I think that's super important. How does this tool make sure that everybody in the team feels that this is our joint effort? So I think brainstorming, which I guess everybody's familiar with, I think that's actually, brainstorming is more about engaging people than coming up with good ideas. Everybody is told that brainstorming is great for idea generation, but you can disagree with me. But, you know, after 20 years of brainstorming, I think it's actually much better for engaging people than coming up with good ideas. And the sparring question, of course, here is kind of the same, that if you were alone, would you use this tool? Or let's put it this way, that if all your coworkers were machines, would you use this tool? Because you don't have to engage machines. You don't have to motivate machines. You don't have to make machines commit. But if you have the problem that you need to motivate, commit, engage people, hear their opinions, yeah, you probably need a tool that is very good at that stuff. And then the fourth one, tools are actually for doing. And then, of course, a classical tool like this monkey wrench, it is actually really good at opening bolts. And because you can adjust the width, it is really good at opening a variety of size of bolts. So doing here, of course, means that you're taking the project or whatever you're doing forward, helping maybe to work, you know, if you have a huge project, how do you split it into pieces that everybody could kind of understand and work step by step and so forth. So, of course, prototypings are something like that. I think customer journey is actually very good at doing things. Customer journey canvas has many of these dimensions. Business model canvas actually takes you further and so forth. And the sparring question I put here is that if your task was just to give a presentation, would you use this tool? Would I build a prototype if I need to give a presentation? Maybe, because prototypes are really good at communicating, are they? But I guess you get the point that if your next step is just to communicate, then you probably not should use a tool that is all about, you know, taking things further. So, and of course it is that these tools, they have all of these dimensions. Some are really good at some things, and it doesn't mean that if they're really good at communication, they're not good at doing things. But I'm presenting you this kind of 4 dimensions. The point was that as a facilitator, the better you understand what the tools are for, the better you are at your job. So again, just like I said earlier, think about the tools you are using in your job as a facilitator, or maybe just your ordinary work. And take a step back and think about them. You know, how do they fit into these dimensions? Are they really good at all of these 4 dimensions? Or can you say that, okay, this is actually really good for this or that? And then going back to the couple of things that we talked about earlier, you can see definitely the communication is much about helping others to understand kind of the reification part, and the engagement, of course, fits nicely with the participation. Jari, did you have something?
Yes, actually, this is very, very good kind of classification of different purposes of tools. But in practice, it's always happening. There's always collaboration and communication within whatever tool you are using. So it's also contributing this engagement and meaning making, whether we are doing or doing research, because then we have to somehow understand what we are doing, and that's an important part in every tool use all the time. Remember that's kind of meta level of what's happening, that there is no simple just one outcome or purpose of using a tool. But
yeah. And then again, now that you said that, you know, many of us might find ourselves in a situation where somebody said, why are we using this tool? It's kind of like, okay, Risto, why are we using value proposition canvas? And then I need to give a good point. I've said, oh, okay, because it has this communication function, it has this function. So then of course it comes a question, how do you help other people to use the tools? So this is, of course, is you as a midwife, you as a professional facilitator, rather than being a solo artist, rather than you just self-using those tools and coming up with awesome answers, which might be perfectly fine, but typically we are a group of people. And if we take the facilitator midwife perspective, then it's all about how do we help others to succeed. So I'm not going to give you like a full theory. I'm going to give just a few points that I think are important. And my experiences, of course, comes actually here very much from my professional background. So like I said, almost 20 years as a facilitator, either as a consultant or a supervisor or a business, business responsible product owner and so forth. And some of the work I have done with this. So that's where I come from. So if you don't fully agree with me, that's probably correct because you have a different background. But this is what I present here. And I have 3 things I want to kind of give you a glimpse and hopefully make you think about these things next time you face these topics. So how to facilitate a couple of important things when you're trying to get strategic answers to strategic questions. So that's number 1. Number 2, I think customer perspective, in my experience, is something people typically need a lot of facilitation as well. And then the third one is ideas. I think we live in a world where everybody thinks that ideas are easy and we just produce ideas, but I don't like the word idea. I think the idea as a mental concept is very limited. So I'll tell you a little bit more about that. But let's go before the break. First, facilitating strategic thinking. And this is, you probably spot, is something that we've been doing in this course quite a lot. Because coming up with good answers that are strategic and meaningful is not that easy. So people typically need a facilitator or help to come up with good strategic answers, which is another way of saying giving birth to clear objectives. And yes, we're back to the objectives, back to the dumb objectives, back to the things that we talked earlier. That's I'm a firm believer of. Because the first thing I encourage you to think that, okay, like I said, answering strategic questions is difficult. But even more difficult is to have people write them down. So imagine again yourself in a situation that somebody asks you a very strategic question, such as, what should we do with our product? What's our vision for the year 2026? That's a strategic question. And you might struggle to give an answer, but you might come up with an answer. And then actually somebody, could you please write that down? And if you have ever been in that situation, it's actually then you kind of go like, yeah, should I use this word or that word? So writing down things, in my experience, that's what people need a lot of help with. Simple question. What's our objective? How does it link to strategy? How do we know we are done on all the DUMBs we talked about? And a couple of tricks I'm throwing at you here is that as a facilitator, you can help people to kind of help them balance. That if it's a kind of the strategic answers, that sometimes it's easy to answer a very broad, a very abstract answer. Our vision for 26 is that we're the #1 in the market. Great, but that's a very broad answer. Or then maybe it's a very narrow answer. It's kind of like, well, I think that our product should have a red button. Well, great, but what about a little bit broad? So in my experience as a facilitator, you need to kind of help people to find the line between having too broad and having too detailed answers. And a good facilitator has in their back pocket, they have examples, well, when I, this and this product did it like this, and sometimes people answer it like this, and that will help people to come up with like the right balance. What is a good level of answering these questions? Another trick in this situation is listening to people and then summarizing it back to them. It's kind of like they give their answer and then you go like, okay, so if I understood it correctly, this is what you meant. And suddenly it becomes a dialogue. It becomes a dialogue, one-person dialogue. Can you see? It's only actually the one person kind of but you as a facilitator are a bouncing board. And of course, you bring in your own expertise and all the examples and everything you can bring in. Sometimes a little role playing, like a very light role playing, like the one in the slide is kind of like, okay, let's imagine that the company CFO, the Chief Financial Officer, is here. How would you explain this objective to them? Or let's imagine that our most important customer comes in. How would you explain it to them? And that typically helps people to have different perspectives and look at it from different angles. Then one of the challenges in the strategic question is often that the decision making is not there. That maybe there is a boss somewhere above, but they are not there in the workshop or in the discussion or in the sprint or something like that. So just, I'm going to jump of these and you can look back to them if you find them relevant in your own job. But here the quick answer is to do your best to get the decision making there, but still move on other areas before you can get it. But I think this is something that stops people. Then the next one is the last one about this, that how do you get accountability? So people think that, is this just a silly exercise? You're asking me, what is the vision for 2026? Does it really matter what I answer? Yeah, it does. Or how do you make it so that it does matter? And the very quick answer here is that you bring in real people. You bring really the boss there. You really bring real customers there. So people don't think anymore that it's a silly exercise. They are actually starting to think about, yeah, what is a good answer to this? Or you make them present those answers to somebody else. And it makes them more accountable about it. So that was the first point. The second one, I think people need a lot of help with, is to understand the customer's perspective. And this is all about empathy and diversity. Because the fact is that seeing the world from another human being's perspective is difficult. It is difficult. I don't know how you think about it, but I believe it's actually very difficult. How on earth do I know what the world looks like from your perspective? I'm not you. But this also means that empathy is actually difficult. And I really think that we should say this aloud. Empathy is important in many areas, but also it's not that easy. So the question is, how do you facilitate empathy in others? And in a business context, organization context, it is really about how do you understand your customers? How do you understand, the people you're trying to change in your organization? How do I understand my boss? How do I understand my team members? So one of the couple of things that I mentioned here is like the second bullet. I think that's a very good one to start understanding people and listening to people, is that divide their worldview into two distinct parts. It's kind of like, what does your everyday life look like? So think about customers. You're building something for your customers. It's different to talk and understand them. What does their everyday life look like? As opposed to more strategic view. What does their long-term life look like? It's more easy to people to answer like, well, I wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning, I eat breakfast, I cycle to work. It's relatively easy to answer what everyday life looks like. But if somebody asks you, let's say in a professional context, so what is your career look like? What are your professional ambitions? Who do you want to be in 5 years? It's kind of like, yeah, people kind of sit down, it's a different kind of thing, but I think that's a way of helping them to answer questions, to facilitate them to tell what their world actually looks like. Then another classic one in this context is that it's so easy to ignore customers. It's so easy to ignore other people. And the classic one is that, hey, all of this listening to customers, that's consumer business. We are in the business to business business. We are B2B. We don't have to do consumer studies. And that's like super wrong. Because business to business, of course, it's a hugely diverse area. You cannot bundle them into one. And if anybody here has been working in a business to business domain knows that it can be actually much more personal, much more face-to-face communication than some of the business to consumer areas. So for example, I was facilitating a company that had more or less 70 customers in the whole market, 70. They knew all the customers by their first name and last name. They knew where they lived. How personal is that? And that was a business to business area. But of course, the point in the slide is one of the big points is that actually then the avenue into the empathy and customer understanding is the sales process. How does the sales process happen? Because that's how typically business to businesses sometimes contact the customers, and that's where you find the empathy on that. But as a kind of final point, that just saying that not talking to people is actually super easy for some reason. It is very easy to avoid empathy. It's very easy to avoid listening to others. It's very easy to be alone. And here I give you 6 powerful excuses if you don't really want to try to understand other people. Good. But I have one more thing to go before the break. And that, like I said, the third one I want to kind of leave things for you to think about is how do you facilitate people to come up with new ideas? And like I said, I think you kind of help people to come up with good ideas. I'm a big fan of talking about value propositions. So I like the value proposition canvas here in the corner. Because ideas can be anything. Ideas can be, you know, hey, let's put a button up there in the corner. And ideas can be like, hey, let's change capitalism. You know, that's not very actionable. Ideas can be anything between the earth and the sky. But value propositions, if you're asking like, hey, how would you turn that idea into a value proposition? That already requires that there's somebody, a customer or an end user. It also implies that you are providing something. And it implies there's a relationship between these two. And like I said in the slide, this actually emphasizes that there is a relationship between an organization and a customer. And suddenly the ideas get much more actionable and make much more sense. And there are, just as an example about this, there are a couple of really good tools for ideation and hoping that these examples kind of give you some ideas. So the customer journey, which is a tool for how does our customers, they become aware of our, product, then they consider buying it, then they make the purchase decision, then they start using it, they use it again, that's just like a basic customer journey. This is a really good tool. And going back to the kind of 4 dimensions I talked about, this has actually everything in it. It's really good at communicating how we want our customers to behave. It's really good at engaging people. You can put it in a wall and, get other people's opinions. It's really good at doing research, and it's actually really good at designing how our customer journey should be. And just as a tool, you can use this in 20 minutes, or you can use this for 20 days because it's such a rich tool. And if you think about as an idea, that somebody has an idea, and then you start expanding or focusing that idea into a customer journey, it becomes much, much better because ideas are so vague. There's a customer journey thing, but maybe just a few words about the business model canvas, which is very popular tool as well. Just few is that actually the power of it for people who are not that business oriented, just to remember, asking the question, who will pay and what, is always a really good question to ask. And then somebody might say, well, we work for the university, nobody pays for this. Yeah, but somebody picks up the bill. Somewhere you have to get the resources. So like it says in the bottom of here that, getting realistic numbers takes time, but they are very, very valuable. Even if you throw the numbers away, it forces you to think about from a different dimension about those ideas of yours again. And I want to make, as you can see in the footnote, I have worked with plenty of designers in my life. Actually, introducing design thinking to non-designers is much more easier than introducing design thinking to professional designers. But let's not go into there yet. But you might, if you want, you can comment on the chat as well. I don't know, maybe you have seen this kind of a situation. That this is my point, that people get allergic reactions about certain words. And maybe you so go like, hey, let's work in an agile way. And then they go, oh, you said the word agile. I'm not a software developer. I won't listen. Maybe you said, hey guys, we should have to look at this from a business angle. And then somebody might say, I heard the word business. I'm not a business person, so it's not really for me. Or last but not least, you use the D word. And then people go like, I'm not a designer. I don't wear a silly hat and I don't drink matcha lattes, so I won't listen to you. Pardon for my stereotype. So how do you actually then facilitate, for example, design thinking if you cannot use the D word, if people get allergic reactions to it? So first of all, again, take a step back. Think that for example, what is design thinking? What is design if you cannot use the D word? And, all of us who are designers and professionals, it's a good exercise to think, yeah, there's customer centricity, there is a business angle there, technology plays a role, creativity is in a big role, typically it's visual, very much collaboration, very problem-driven, or maybe solution-driven, blah, blah, blah. So these are all the things that design is, but you're not using the D word. So let's imagine that you have a team of people, of non-designers, and you would really see that they would benefit from design thinking, but you cannot use the D word. So of course you don't start with the design. Yeah, Jari.
No, I mean, this is really a crucial point, is to let them find the thinking of their own terms, because this really is something that if we go there as an external and start educating people with different language, that's already, we are resisting that. But allowing people to define things by their own words and using that and aligning, and then thinking that, okay, you are calling it that way, and then they are much more with your side as well. And that's also respectful that their thinking is already valid. So it's not about the teaching stuff so much. And
absolutely,
I really see that as important in many occasions.
And that's the secret sauce in my soup and in my recipe, just like you said. So it's kind of, then you ask yourself that if you think that design or maybe agile ways of working or thinking that this is what they need, then actually take a step back and try to understand what's their problem. How do they see? Do they see the same problem? And they would be open for a solution. So the first step, again, in my recipe for design thinking for non-designers is listen to them, help them, facilitate to clarify their objectives. What do they want to achieve? What are their business objectives? What are their goals? What are their KPIs, OKRs, and so forth? Maybe do the DOM exercise. What is the problem that this team is trying to solve? Help them facilitate and clarify that in their own terms, in their language, in their own objectives. And then once they start doing these objectives, make them accountable. Don't tell them this is an exercise, but can you make this? What are your objectives? Then they maybe write something down and you go, is this your objective? If I go to your boss and show this, would they agree? So first of all, make it realistic. And this is something that Jari, you also highlighted, that it is in their own terms, which means make it realistic, make them accountable for these answers. Mm. And then typically, people start understanding the business challenges. And maybe if they're kind of looking at this as a design thing, when you start with real problems, with real challenges, real objectives that they bring up, then it's easier for them to understand that this is serious stuff. This is not kids playing with colorful toys.
Can I say something here?
Oh, yeah.
Because it's really asking about the words. Because in all organizations, we quite fluently use quite abstract language and different words. And asking about those words, what you really mean this, it can be really helpful that they start thinking like, okay, there's quite diverse interpretation around this, or they are quite vague because it does sound nice. So and this objective, or what you really mean with this, can be really good start.
And the trick here is make them write it down.
Yeah,
it's so much easier to talk.
Yep.
Talk is cheap. Make them write it down. That brings accountability automatically. Then the next step to make this serious, to make this realistic, is to bring in real people. Something I mentioned earlier. You know, if these are your business objectives, then who are your customers? And then you bring a real person who is their customer, literally. Get them into the room, you know, make them talk with them, make them try to understand their perspective. Relatively easy, but the magic is that there's a real person who's a real customer. Again, they cannot hide behind any studies, they cannot hide behind any data, they cannot hide behind their own prejudice. If there's a real person in the room, they have to talk with and try to understand what the customer wants. So that would be my step number 2. And again, here, remember what I talked about, the empathy. It's not necessarily easy. So you need to be very mindful that, you know, people can talk to customers, but if they don't know how to listen, you know, listen beyond the words, then this exercise might be just totally fruitless. They might just go, hey, this is a very consumer business exercise, but we are B2B. So yeah, I can talk to the customers, but this doesn't really matter. Yeah, Jari.
And sometimes the customer can be really the neighboring team, that they are needing something from us. So bringing that, so it's a little bit this kind of collaborative relations within. And of course, the end customer is somewhere needing that, but it's also can be internal. But really discussing over the fence is and bringing people really to give a point what is needed. So I think that's a very, very good advice.
And especially, I mean, stakeholders and let's say, you know, internal, we kind of assume that they see that if they work for the same company, of course they see the world in the same way.
It's
no
always,
way.
There's always differences and it's, I mean, it's a very basic thing. And we have some threshold that why should we go there and ask, but I think this is very, very healthy thing to do.
And as a facilitator, like the point of this whole step number 2 is that, hey, you help, you just bypass the problem that meeting people is difficult by bringing a person to the room. They cannot avoid it anymore. They just need to deal with it. Then step number 3, once you have helped them to clarify, hey, these are the business goals you set yourself. This was a real customer in your real world. Then step number 3, I would do, let them do something creative. Let them do something they might think is a bit silly, something they would have never done. Let them play with things. So, you know, make a mock-up, make a funny service for the customer and, you know, laugh about it, make a dystopia exercise. What would be the most terrible product that would totally destroy the company and have our customers hating us? That's creativity for it. So, you know, let them loose, taste the creativity, but not give the real objectives yet. You keep them in the wall or in your back pocket. And especially if they're not familiar or maybe skeptical about stuff like role playing or, you know, writing stories and narratives, or like I said, the dystopias, if they're skeptical about laughing, then this is where you let them loose and don't mention anything serious here. Because then the next step is, oh, actually I had this thing to again about this, that typically you might bump into problems that are kind of mindset problems that you might have to deal with as a facilitator. So, you know, and this is where you need to be, a good facilitator can start reading the people. That are they actually solving problems, or are they more just doing what is told, or are they doing what is expected of them? You can see the difference, that these are different ways of approaching problems. Is there psychological safety? Can they take risks in this team, in this company, in this culture? Hippo is the highest paid person in the room. So is everybody looking at the big boss or the highest paid person for the answers before they say anything? Are they always trying to find a consensus among group? Nobody wants to disagree. Is that how they actually play this game or how they work? Courage, risk-taking, everything plays a role. And then, of course, the energy levels. How familiar are they thinking about the outside the box? Is it very difficult for them to see other people's perspectives? Do they need to take one night of sleep? You know, is this the moment where you go like, okay, now we all go home, everybody sleep over it, and then tomorrow we continue? You know, can you see that this actually requires for them to digest everything before you can move? So things like that probably pop up when you make them do these creative and playful things. And then maybe they have gone home after, you know, painting each other and doing role plays and writing narratives and laughing for the first time in job. And then in the next morning, you bring them back and go like step number 4. You try not to lose the fun, don't lose the laughing, don't lose the inspiration, the energy, and then tell that, hey, what if we try these new things, these silly things, these creative things, for the real objectives that you gave us? How about that? And then, you know, then you are actually, as you can probably see between the lines, you are making them do design. You are making them creative without necessarily pushing it down their throats. And then, of course, have a reflection in the end. Listen to them. Again, it's about them. It's not about you. You're the midwife. They're giving birth to the baby. Might need to give some painkillers or tell them how it goes, but you're not giving the birth here. So how do you kind of, you know, this is the, remember in the temporal onion, it's all about what happens afterwards. This is all about it. Listening to them, facilitating them to actually change ways of working. So everything you do in this sprint or workshop, make it beneficial. How do you keep motivation that, okay, this was it, guys. I'm going to go away. Thanks for these 2 days. But how do you help them to change their ways of working? How do you help them to take the tools? Maybe we'll make it a reality show. It's like, hey, now you're going to present these results for the whole company. And they go like, what? And, you know, that gives, again, accountability. You know, that pushes them to actually make the most of it. Maybe you celebrate the hard work, give them stickers, give them rewards, badges, go and buy a beer for everybody. And then 4th point, after 1 or 2 weeks, get them together and go like, hey, okay, what happened? You know, it's 2 weeks since we had this workshop. What has changed? What did you do? How do you think now about it? What makes easy to use this thinking? What makes it difficult, all this? And so forth and so forth. And the last trick is really perhaps something you already have used as a facilitator, is that at the end of the sprint or the workshop or whatever, you ask everybody, make one promise that you will do next week that you learned from here. That's accountability. And then if you meet them again after 2 weeks, you'll be like, hey, remember, you promised that you will, you know, start using brainstorming every morning. How did it go? Did you keep your promise? And so forth, which is really, again, helping them to actually apply the new learnings and thinking. And then, of course, the very final step in this soup is that then you might go and say, hey, by the way, everything we did today, some people call it design thinking. You don't call it design thinking, but a lot of people do, which means that when next time you go to the library, maybe you go to the internet, or maybe you take a course at university, if you want more of this, you know, look under the word design thinking, and this whole richness pops up. It's kind of tens of years and you know, thousands of books about this. But just like Jari, you said, now it's their design thinking. It's not like some external wise ass is going to tell them that this is how they should work, but it's kind of like they found their own way of applying design thinking even before you mentioned that this was design thinking. So as an example here for this very particular case, but I think this is applicable, you know, as a general principle, again, about facilitating and helping people to learn new things, is at least I kind of use this in very many different contexts. You start with the real problems, real objectives. You again add to the reality, maybe bringing the end users, customers, clients. Then you throw in the new methods. You kind of, hey, you know, let's try these new methods. You know, everybody paint your faces with yellow. And then you turn that into the actually solving the original task, which you did in steps 1 and 2. And like I said, this was my recipe, and probably others as well. Like I said, Many of you commented on this. Any thoughts on this? I'm sure this would apply, like I said, if you want to bring agile work methods into the group, or maybe even just introduce a Kanban to the team. And something like this probably works. Yeah, Jean-Claude is asking, what are some alternative words that can be used to advertise this kind of service, workshop, design, sprint facilitating, if you don't want to call it design thinking? Creative innovation, product development 2.0. Kind of, again, it depends kind of what other people, if they're engineers, then I would use maybe product development, alternative product engineering methodology workshop. And if they're business people, then I would call it maybe, value creation methodology, customer value, more valuable customer value workshop. Okay, Laura is writing, bringing in real customers feels like a challenge and will limit how often this can be achieved, at least if not higher up in corporate ladder, where such wishes are probably more readily acted on. Yeah, I think so, Laura. This might be difficult, but maybe this is a silly answer, but that's exactly why you should do it. If it is difficult, it means that nobody else has done it. But of course, it kind of depends on the business, how easy it is to get customers. But I have many times, hundreds of times actually pushed people that, okay, is it really that difficult? For example, just a quick answer, I had a company and their customers were in Alaska and they were in Finland. And then I was kind of like, well, you need to get customer interviews. So they arranged, so they were kind of like, it's very difficult, it's impossible, they are in Alaska. But then I was kind of like, and then after a week, they were like, oh, okay, we actually contacted them. But we had a telco and it was great. Yeah, Lydia makes a good point over here that typically the sales team might be slightly jealous about the customers. You don't want just anybody talking with the key accounts, for example. But then maybe take the salesperson with you. I'm not saying it's easy, but I'm saying that's because it's not easy. You should definitely do it. It's kind of like once you do it, the value is really large because it was difficult. But yeah, then you probably need to work with the sales team and the sales representatives and all that, and talk with them and tell them what you are doing and so on, and bring them aboard. Okay, maybe one more, two more. Collaborative goal setting, that's a good one. Okay, Anna says, how would you approach this in a very hierarchical old company culture, as you presented in a culture where everyone is looking at the boss? I would start talking with the boss, maybe privately, just going over. Try to get the boss on board and then kind of together with the boss talk that how should we do this? Is there a role that the boss can play? Maybe the role is that the boss is not there. Maybe the role is that the boss shows an example. The boss, becomes silly and creative, whatever. So that's a very quick answer then, just to deal with that situation. But then, of course, the key here is that you kind of get the boss to agree that they can do it. And there's many ways that, maybe you say that, hey, maybe you should let the team try out new things and we will report to you. And then you kind of frame it as a pilot, as a trial, as an experiment. This is nothing that will fundamentally change anything, but can we just try this out for 2 days? And then once you get the results, you show the results, and then smart people go like, hey, this is very interesting. So maybe we should continue this trial. In your experience, do all the leaders take serious younger facilitators? I think smart people take young facilitators seriously. It's not about age, it's about just how smart you are. People can be whatever age and they can be narrow-minded or very broad-minded, and A very broad-minded person really listens to people from different backgrounds, from different ages, and tries to see their point of view. And then kind of make an assessment that, okay, that's very interesting. Is that valuable? But yeah, I understand your question. It's a good. Okay, then the last exercise of the whole course. So deadline before Wednesday next week. So we actually have time to look at them before the lecture. Exercise is, in all simplicity, facilitate your pair in designing some kind of a workshop. What do we mean by this? So you have person A in your pair. They have a task. I need to design a workshop in their work context. Maybe it's their hobbies. Maybe it is for their friends. Come up with some kind of a workshop that is realistic for you. Hopefully workplace, doesn't have to be workplace, but try it to be realistic. And then person B is there, hey, I'm your facilitator. I'm your midwife. I will help you. Again, so idea, start using something like the temporal, start planning what needs to happen before the workshop, what happens after the workshop, maybe even start with the desired impact. And then after that, you design the workshop. Here's a bunch of questions. Some of them are probably familiar because you've been on this course for a long time. If this workshop is a solution, what is actually the underlying problem? Why should we have this workshop? If this is the remedy, what is the illness? Then starting that, how does it fit into other activities? How does it, benefit from all different directions? Who are taking part? All of this understanding before the workshop starts. Then during the workshop, probably help and facilitate the other person to have some kind of a schedule. Here's, for example, this is like a 5-day sprint. But you can take the same for a 1-day workshop. It has like 5 stages with breaks between. Ask them, why is this step? What's the outcome of this step? Is there any risks, about this step? What about this next one step and all of this? Again, facilitating, sparring questions. And don't overlook the details. The details are the thing. How many hours? How many participants? What's the objective of the whole thing? What do people expect when they come to the workshop? What do you think they expect to happen? What do they know already, and so forth and so forth? Is it about lecturing, or are you going to make them work, and so forth? Because once you know how you're going to run it, like it says in the bottom, it makes so much easier for you to say that, okay, what's the schedule? How many breaks? What's the actual room about? Do we need food? What tools I'm going to use? What kind of an email or message I'm going to send beforehand, and so forth. Then I added this. This is what I call the Jari's checklist from the previous lecture, kind of your sensitivity calibration. How are you going to answer all of these questions? And then, of course, after. You already plan what happens after the workshop. How do you know if the workshop was successful? In the short term, in the long term. How will you know that the participants changed their thinking or way of working or something else? If it's an ideation workshop, what happens to the idea afterwards? Again, remember, success is defined outside the event. So how do you know what happens afterwards? Because at the end of the day, the workshop is there to serve some bigger cause. So understand what's the bigger cause, the context onion, and how will you benefit the kind of the bigger context and the bigger cause. So here in simplicity, again, facilitate your pair's work. Person A, you're in charge of planning a 1-day workshop, or maybe it's a sprint for 3 days, 5 days, something similar. You're going to be the one answering the questions. And use this. If you really need to design a workshop or a sprint, then that's perfect. Use this exercise to help you out. And then, of course, the person B, who's the facilitator, you facilitate, coach, help them, ask them just by what are you doing, why are you doing this, who's going to participate. Use the checklists. You don't have to answer all of the questions in the checklists, but have a look at them. Pick the good questions you feel are relevant. And then last but not least, again, reflected on it. So this is what we're actually really looking for. Maybe give yourself 5 minutes in quiet after doing the facilitations, and then come together and say that, okay, this is what came to me and this came to me, and discuss them. Again, the focus is discuss you as the facilitator, not you as the person who's going to run the workshop. It's probably going to influence your learnings, make no mistake. But we are really, again, reflect and evaluate yourself as a facilitator and as the other person. I thought about, I felt like this when I was facilitating you, what did it feel like to you? That's the exercise. Jari, anything you want to comment?
Well, I think referring to last week's exercise here is now a good opportunity to really kind of take also reflect on this position, how to be there, helping other to figure out, and maybe not giving advice or good ideas, but really ask questions why you think like this, and what leads, what's the connections and so on, so that other can figure out and plan further. So and again, this is kind of meta reflection in a way, not the content of the workshop, but really you as a facilitator and asking feedback. I think it is a very good exercise in that sense, how it was experienced, why it was helpful, and so on. And that's also in the future really asking feedback. That's the one key of your learning and development as a facilitator, that how others experienced. But very good summary, summing up the whole series of exercises.
Yeah, this is kind of your final, like it says, final task. This is trying to bring everything together. And just to mention, reserve some time for this, so maybe 1 hour.
Yeah.
And 20 minutes first person, 20 minutes second person, 20 minutes for the reflection, something like that. But keep an eye on the time, because you might go over time with this. So be mindful of that. And
maybe it's good to have some pre-thoughts, because 20 minutes is quite short, and if you then start thinking, that might be a quite open situation. So be prepared. Absolutely, yeah. We are assuming that you actually come to these exercises prepared. Yeah. And you at least know what the exercise is all about. I think that's respectful for the other person. Yeah, indeed. That's it. That was lecture 556. Next week, we're wrapping it all up. I'm going to talk a little bit more about meta skills and all that. Don't leave yet. Super important. This course will totally vanish from the universe on 12th of June. You will not be able to contact us after 12th of June because we're busy. So if you have any missed exercises or anything like that, we will help you, but not after 12th of June. So next week, when we, after the last exercise, Rosa and Annika will, help you and send, kind of give you, if you're missing some exercises or something like that, we will let you know. But just to make sure that, well, for example, if you're missing an exercise, you need to return it before the 12th. If you return it on the 13th of June, we will be back somewhere in September. So it will take you many months to get the credits. So just to let you know, please help us and help yourself by remembering to deliver everything by 12. Further readings for today. The one in the bottom here, free tools on facilitation, leadership, and transformation. This is something we did a few years ago in this course. We asked a couple of companies here in the Nordics and just to share their tools for free. So have a look at it. That should be over there. Somebody was asking in the chat about these links. You get it from the slides, but we can provide them otherwise as well.